Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this very first episode of Film and Impact. I'm Zephyr Roy and I'm your host. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to be connecting with indie filmmakers from around the world, talking about their experiences, their practice of filmmaking, the obstacles they face, their successes also, and just how they use in documentary to move the needle in their parts of the world. So today I'm going to be talking with a filmmaker from El Salvador who's currently based in LA. We met in November 2019 at IDFA and we just instantly connected. She's such an amazing person and I'm so stoked to have her as our first guest on Film and Impact. She's someone who gives a very big place to community, collaboration and experimenting in her work. And her work has been seen in places such as the Los Angeles Film Festival at IDFA, and her latest documentary, Tamales Y Tunas, just premiered at the Black Star Film Festival this August, and she's going to be talking a bit about that. And she's also going to be talking about culture making, growing as a migrant filmmaker, and how indie filmmakers around the world are transforming documentary aesthetics and storytelling structures. So super excited. Let's make this magic happen and welcome filmmaker, director, and DP Amada Torruella to this episode of Film and Impact. Welcome to Film and Impact, and thank you for accepting to be on the show. I'm really excited to be talking with you. And I was asking you just before if you can just tell me how you pronounce your last name, because I'm pretty sure that whichever way that I said it, I don't think it was the right pronunciation.
It actually works both ways. Torruella or Torruella.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Amada Torruella.
Amada Torruella, yes.
Yay! Not too bad. Okay.
Oh, really good. Yes, not bad at all.
Okay, Amada, I'm really, really excited to have you on with us. So you're a filmmaker, you're a curator, there's something that I noticed under your email signature that says culture maker that I love. Maybe you'll tell us a little bit about that and like what that means to you. You're from El Salvador, but you're based in LA right now, but you've lived in like a lot of different places around the world, and something I'm really jealous of. You speak 5 languages, which I think is pretty amazing. And you've worked like in a lot of different places as different things. You've worked in media, journalism. You've done a lot of projects like community-based projects, media literacy projects also. You have like your different indie films. There's one that I saw recently that I liked a lot. What I would like to start with is like you have like an intensely rich background, and I would like you to tell us how you became a filmmaker. What was that journey like? Why did you become a filmmaker? And how?
How?
How did that happen? How did you go from like, point A, like did something happen? You're like, okay, I want to make films, I want to do something, change something, or was it like a process where, it slowly happened?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Zephyr, for having me and for inviting me to have a chat. This is wonderful, and I am grateful to you and Stephanie for making this space. I think that becoming a filmmaker is definitely something that has happened slowly, and is something that is still happening.
Yeah.
I think that I'm still very much, becoming, and I think it's what I enjoy about that world, about the filmmaking world, because there's a lot of different roles that a person can have, and I've been, trying on all the different hats But I think that I I was born in El Salvador, and when I was, and I hope it's okay. I think that it's better to like just talk a little bit about how I find myself, where I find myself
Yes.
first,
Yes. Yeah.
um, to kind of like talk, understand, because I think that now that I feel like a filmmaker, and that because that in and of itself has been a lot of work, um, to to call myself a filmmaker is a lot of work, for myself, and I think that the journey has been, you know, the journey of becoming a filmmaker, has been happening throughout my entire life, and so I'll just start from a little bit from the beginning to see where we are now and where I am now in my life.
Okay.
Um, so I think so. I was born in El Salvador, and in the late '80s. So during that time, it was a very turbulent, one of the most turbulent times, because it's still a turbulent time in my country. But when I was born, it was one of the most turbulent times because my country was in a civil war. And so when I was around 3 years old, my parents decided that we that it wasn't it just wasn't going to be safe enough for our family anymore, and we applied as asylum seekers, to migrate to Canada. And so we left El Salvador and we moved to Canada when I was 3 years old. And that's where I grew up. um, Spanish was definitely the first language that I knew how to speak and that I understood. But English was the first language that I learned how to read and how to write. So from a very early age, you know, there's been like um, this contradiction, uh, living inside of me, you know, from the moment I was really little, because Spanish was my mother tongue and the language that I spoke with my loved ones, with my family members. But English was what I used in the outside world, you know? So there's always been like an inside world and an outside world that I've had to like adapt to. And I think that's how I've lived my entire life. So it's been really interesting. And also being a part of that wave of immigrants during the late 80s, early 90s, you know, there were so many different countries going through conflict during that time. So if you look at my classroom photo from when I was like in first grade in Canada, we're all immigrants in that photo. You know, there's kids from all different parts and places. And it's interesting because during that time, I think a lot of, you know, people, to make sense of it, talked about it as, you know, a multicultural wave. But I've realized now that what that does is a concept that just, you know, talks about it in euphemisms and doesn't really point to the fact that we were all, you know, children of wars and childs of conflict that were finding refuge in places like Canada and the
Yeah.
United
A
States.
beautiful term that really masks like the experiences, the individual experiences of all these children.
Yeah,
Do
definitely.
you feel, maybe I'm jumping like a bit in the timeline of your story? Do you feel like this experience of having sort of like a dichotomy, like this the Spanish existing alongside like English, like the your inside world and the outside world, the language that you share with your family, and then the language that you use like to communicate on the outside. Do you feel that this affected you like as a filmmaker in becoming?
Um, I I definitely think that it has, in a very positive way. I think that it's allowed for me to understand kind of, you know, what my superpower is as a filmmaker. I think that it's something that gives me tools that that not all filmmakers have. And I think that, you know, that's what makes this new generation of, you know, Black filmmakers, Indigenous filmmakers, all these filmmakers of color that are starting to tell their stories and share their work. I think that that's what makes us, you know, stand out and be unique, because when you know, live different realities and have different realities inside and carry different realities inside of yourself because of the different experiences that you've had, or the different ways you've had to adapt to fit in a world that is not for you. I think that that makes you, you know, be able to really see the nuance in different stories and really see, you know, your characters and your protagonists in a very unique way. And I think that being able to see the nuances in stories and see that the world isn't just black and white and see all the different shades of gray, I think that that helps you, you know, want to tell stories because they're so much more complex um, than maybe some people think they are. And so I think that right now I'm starting to realize that that's actually a tool that helps me, you know, be the filmmaker that I've always been, but that I didn't know that that was something for me. And, you know, all of that to say, talking about that first part of my journey, as I like to call it, in that timeline, is that I didn't, you know, I grew up in an immigrant household in, you know, the outskirts of Toronto in Canada. And I after that, after living in Canada for a while as a Salvadoran immigrant, and then actually moving back to El Salvador, which is rare, because, you know, normally if you migrate to a country, that's where you stay. That's the idea. But there was a lot of family conflict and a lot of family issues that arose. And so we ended up moving back to El Salvador with my family. And so I was probably 10, 11 when we moved back.
I was gonna ask you like how you felt about the choice, but you were a bit too young, so it wasn't a choice that you made. Yeah,
Yeah,
you were
it
necessarily.
wasn't, I wasn't happy about it.
Okay.
I saw myself as a Canadian girl, and, you know, my mother especially, um, she really cared about the Canadian identity and this new life that she was trying to build for me and for our family. And I think that that she she really wanted me to be proud of where I was from. And I don't, and not to say that she is ashamed about being from El Salvador, but I think that at that time, you know, it's hard when your country has suffered, you know, social and political turmoil and has harmed you and those that you loved so much, to the point that, you know, you're trying to rebuild yourself after that. And so I think that my mother really pushed for me to have, you know, this Canadian identity. And so when we moved back to El Salvador, I had a really hard time connecting with that country, and I didn't consider it my home anymore. And so all of my coming of age years and my teenage years, and, you know, all those formative years that are so important, especially for a girl, you know, I had my period in El Salvador. all these things that happen to a young girl happened to me in a country that I was, you know, trying to embrace again. And all of that to say that because of this journey I was on and this life I had, I always saw filmmaking as a luxury. I never saw it as something that I could do, like not in a million years. And I love movies. Movies have always been a part of my life. The first movie I went to see in a movie theater was Jurassic Park. And I will never forget that. And, you know, it's this side of me that I just love, you know, and you know, so for me, seeing people like Steven Spielberg, for example, um, I thought that it was just something that wasn't possible for me. I didn't see myself in that world. I had no idea that it was something that I could do.
I
I
think
just saw it something very far away. You
yeah,
know?
I think it's really important, like what you're saying, because I think it's an experience that is shared by a lot of filmmakers or potential filmmakers
Yeah.
from the Caribbean, from South America, from a lot of developing countries. For myself, for example, I know that as a storyteller, and now I, like yourself, I now say I'm a writer and I'm a producer, but it took me a long time to actually accept like this is who you are, and you sort of have a right to be that, and it's not you're not making believe in anyone. It's not something that's beyond your reach, because from a very young age, it always seemed to be something that was beyond my reach, because it always seemed like something that was outside of my world. So it's outside of your world, it's outside of anything that you can reach. There's nobody around you that has any access to this. So it means that you yourself you have no access to it. So I totally understand what it is that you say.
Yeah, right. And so like, and as you say, like it's a process of allowing for yourself to have ownership. And also like when you discover that it's something that you can do, you also realize that in a way you have to give yourself permission, right? You have to give yourself permission
Yes.
to say, I am a filmmaker. And that just comes with a lot of weight, because since you've grown up in a world where there aren't people doing that, you know, when I was in high school, in a place like El Salvador, that isn't even an option because the film industry isn't developed in a place like El Salvador. Um, because, you know, the war ended in 1993. It's there's a lot of work to be done in a country like that. We're still in a post-war era, you know, we're still in construction. So unfortunately, you know, film isn't seen as a priority. And I think that it should be, because it should be something that is accessible to everybody from all types of backgrounds, because now more than ever I understand that, you know, film is a tool that allows you to put yourself into the cultural landscape, you know, and that's really important because there's so many voices and so many stories. And so that's something that I've been discovering little by little. And so all of this to say, you know, at first, yeah, I didn't see myself out there, so I never thought that it was something that I could do. And it wasn't until I moved. My husband and I, who my husband, he's also from El Salvador. he and I, we moved to the United States in late 2013, early 2014. And it's we moved here, you know, as immigrants. And that's another thing. I feel that I've been a different type of immigrant in many different countries, because you know, when I migrated to Canada with my family, we were asylum seekers. We were trying to find refuge away from the turmoil in our country. When I was older, in my early 20s, I immigrated to France, and I lived in France for 6 years. But I was a student, on a student visa. So it was I didn't belong. I wasn't supposed to be there in a way. I was an immigrant, but I was on a student visa. And then I moved back to El Salvador, and with my husband, when we were both 25, we moved to the United States, and we moved as, you know, Salvadoran immigrants. But it was to work. And it's because, you know, the thing is that my husband, he's a scientist. He specializes in biochemistry. Um, and obviously that is not an industry that exists in El Salvador. So he had to find other areas and other places where he could do what he, you know, what his calling is and what he is passionate about. And so he found a PhD position in in the United States, and we moved there, and started to make a life there. And I always knew that what I wanted to do was work in you know, in the arts and cultural field. And um, and ever since, so we've been living here in the United States for probably 6 years. And it's been really, um, it's been we've had our challenges, but at the same time we know that we are immigrants with a lot of privilege.
What does it mean for you then, like being a filmmaker, working on all these issues, um, and being a culture maker? I mean, there's those two words, culture maker. I can imagine, okay, we can imagine what it means. What does it mean like for you? And a second question that comes to mind is, it's never easy making films on topics like this, uh, because you're always bothering somebody. Your job in part is to shake things, to move the needle, to bother people in a way that, you know, they can be bothered enough for change to happen. But it's never easy to make films like that. So, like, what are the kind of things that, like, the obstacles that you encounter when you're making the films that you're making? Like, uh, if you have like any examples, like in the up until like maybe present projects that you're working on, and like how do you address them? If that's a lot, I can ask you the questions again, like culture maker, and then like the, you know, obstacles, telling the kind of stories that you feel compelled to tell.
Yeah, so when it comes to culture making, I so that's I'm glad that you like the term. It's something that I've been playing around with. I'm still trying to to feel it out, you know, and see if that's what works. What does it mean? And how I can keep, uh, you know, how I can keep it alive in what I do. And I think that it comes from a place of profound concern over what people think culture is. There's this very harmful, I think, idea that culture means that you've had a certain type of education, or that, you know, that you've been exposed to European movements and ways of thinking, and that, you know, culture means that you've, I don't know, that you've dined at fancy restaurants, things like that, that I think that are all very privileged ideas of what culture means.
Culture meaning like culture being equated to like being cultivated
Yes,
literally according
yes.
to like
And
Western, yeah.
and
No.
I think that's very harmful, because it leaves so many people out
Yes.
of what we all understand of someone who is cultured. And I really think that, you know, my understanding of it is uh, openness. You know, culture uh, is about access, and it's about embracing different types of identities and backgrounds. And, you know, the more you connect with people that are different from you, you know, the more that you welcome people into your life that are, you know, that have a different gender identity or a different sexual orientation, or that are from a different country than you, a different religion, you know, that celebrate different cultural traditions. The more people you have in your life that are, you know, from these different backgrounds, I think that that's the more cultured you are, you know. And I think that for me, culture making is a way to talk about um, letting different people in, and building um, with people from different places, and that come from different walks of life, and that carry within them different types of experiences. And for me, that's what culture is about. I feel that, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it's also understanding, you know, it's also being able to understand privilege, and it's also, you know, privilege in yourself, and being able to point out if, you know, what that is. And also, you know, understanding that um that it doesn't matter what class people are from.
Yeah.
You know, you know, and I think that that also comes from the fact that I come from a country uh, that is incredibly classist, um, and there's a huge economic disparity. So there's there's just a huge power imbalance, and I I've learned to kind of um, to hold myself accountable for, and make sure that I don't carry on those classist notions, because people are going to, you know, to learn in different ways than you are. I, for example, have been privileged in my education extremely, and it's not something that I'm ashamed of, because my mom worked really, really hard for me to have access to that education that I have had access to. But that doesn't mean that that makes me better than anybody. That means that I have had opportunities that others have not. And that also means that other people have learned things that maybe I don't know about, or have learned things that I have learned in different types of ways. And I don't know if am I making sense?
No, you're totally making sense.
Like,
No, I really loved what you said about, like your definition of culture and what culture is, and how important it is to have this openness. I think the openness starts with the openness of yourself to yourself, because the first culture I think that you accept and know is your own culture. Because if for example in our case, like here in the Caribbean, or in your case El Salvador or Central America, if being cultivated or being cultured is having or knowing very well like European culture or ways, then you're alienating yourself from yourself. So this notion of like the openness of the self to the self, so you know your own culture first, it's the way that you can also get to know other cultures and be accepting too of others. So
yeah.
yeah, so
I,
I totally get what you're saying.
just to piggyback on what you were just saying, I think that that's a huge part of culture making too. It's, you know, is learning more about your own culture so that you can embrace yourself first, because that will help you embrace others as well. Because, you know, a lot of the culture making in my own work as a Salvadoran woman first is understanding that that in a country like El Salvador, you are raised to love other cultures before your own. You are taught to have an inferiority complex, and you are taught to embrace uh, American culture first. You are taught that that is better than what you grew up with. You are taught that there's all these foreign cultures that are better than your own. And so
You
when
always aspire to something other than what you are and who you are.
yeah, and so what happens is, you know, you develop an inferiority complex. You grow to believe that there isn't, you know, anything rich in, you know, the culture that you come from and the world that you come from and the people that you come from. And that is extremely problematic and extremely harmful. And when you reach a certain age, that where you learn that there's so much that you need to unlearn, that there's so much that you need to like decolonize from, you know, the way you see your own country and your own people, that's where the real work starts. And that's where you also become a better cultural worker, a better cultural bearer, you know, because you realize that so many different communities are doing that same work, because we've been taught for so long that, you know, that there's a developed world and that world is better.
Yes, and then there's an underdeveloped world.
Yes.
And I think this is where like
or an uncultured world, right? Like not only underdeveloped, but it's uncultured,
yes,
and that's just not true.
you're underdeveloped, you're immature, meaning that you haven't come to maturity. And so whatever it is that you produce or you can do, it will never be enough, up to par, up to this standard that's, you know, from that other developed world. And I think this is where like film and filmmaking is, particularly documentary filmmaking, is like really, really important, because we have that same like inferiority complex reflected in documentary filmmaking. What are the stories that we're gonna tell? We sometimes think that our stories are too ordinary to be told, but we will sit in a cinema and look at an independent film from some other place done by a production company from a developed country, like an observational piece that's long and, on some person's life in this place. And we will sit there for like an hour and a half and look at that, because with other people, we say in Creole French here, like, like bonjour, because, this is what the you do when you're cultured. You go to see these films in version originale. So you go to see them in what do you call it, in or the original version. So if it's Korean that's being spoken, whatever, because that's what cultured people do. But as filmmakers, you especially when you're starting out, you're sometimes tempted to tell stories from elsewhere, or you try to make your stories look like stories that you've seen elsewhere. You try to shape it to fit some other narrative. And even sometimes when I think that's something that we're confronted with as filmmakers, when we present stories elsewhere looking for financing, locally or internationally, these are stories that often don't interest people, because they're too ordinary in the context, like our little Caribbean context on an island, like this story of this person on this island, like who is it going to interest? So, and I think that one of the things that we do, especially in the beginning, I know that we did it to a certain extent, is try and find stories that like, that maybe will make like a splash, or that fit things that we see on TV, or that we see on streaming channels, or that maybe people say, oh, the financiers, like they like funders, like they like this kind of film. And it's like a process to accept that our stories are important and
yes, they are.
they deserve to be told.
They do.
So even if
You don't need to look for permission to
yes,
tell them.
so you don't even need to want to see them from the outside. If they don't interest you, that's fine. We're still going to tell them, because my people need to see them. We need to see ourselves in our films. We need to see ourselves in very ordinary situations. We need to see ordinary people living their ordinary lives, facing ordinary challenges and overcoming them, or not, just living lives and seeing ourselves and understanding like we're important. These stories are important, this culture and these cultures are important. And I think I'm totally like in agreement with what you were saying. I really feel it, the role of like filmmaking here, and how important it is. And I think it really hits home, because as filmmakers we have to make those choices at some point. We have to like let go of the baggage and let go of the wanting to be accepted or approved by these higher powers,
Yeah.
higher powers of documentary filmmaking from elsewhere.
Yeah.
At a certain point.
Yeah. And also the way that we tell stories, the way that we do filmmaking, because that's another really exciting thing that as a film curator, I've noticed that's happening everywhere in the world. It's that because filmmakers from underrepresented communities are starting to share their stories and are starting to, to do the work and to find ways to build narratives and be a part of this industry, that means also that the way that stories are structured and the way that films are made, the aesthetic part of it and the storylines and everything, also all of that is also transforming, because there's not just one way to put a film together or to tell a story. The story structure is also transforming because all these different voices are coming into the fold and transforming it. So that's also really exciting to me and beautiful, because it's not just, a story has 3 acts. There's your beginning, there's your middle where you reach your climax, and then there's your ending, and that's it. And it's like, actually, no, a story can be, made up of different ways, and you can have the structure be, a different type of format. And you can, something that I've learned a lot from Black filmmakers especially is that, scenes can be made out of moments in time. It could be that your structure is made up of memories. It can be that it's made up of dreams. It could be that you're focusing on, the feelings that you had during certain moments, and that can be your story. It doesn't need to be like all these rigid actions that are happening. So that's also really exciting to me, because it also just, it's very liberating. It's very liberating. And I think one of the biggest people that I admire as a documentary filmmaker is Ramel Ross. And I was reading, I think, an article of his somewhere, and he used the title to like call himself, he calls himself a liberated documentarian or liberated documentary filmmaker. And I found that, my mind exploded, because that made me feel so happy and excited, because that's exactly what's happening right now, is that, people like Ramel Ross are coming into the fold, and they're saying, wait a minute, I'm going to do this documentary this way. And it's okay, because this is the way I'm doing it. And that's fine. And
I think that really defines the way that he does his work. It's gonna do it that way, and it's fine. And I think because he does it that way, when you're looking at his work, you're just like on for the journey, and you just go where he leads you. And it's fine.
And it's fine, and it's super important, because I'm so happy that something like Hale County this evening exists now, because it really, he's a trailblazer. He's opening up this path for so many of us that are just now understanding and realizing that it's okay to experiment, and that it's okay to do things in different ways, because we're all different and we all have different experiences, and the way that we tell stories is going to be different. And it's comforting to know that you can be free.
I think like that, like what you're saying right now, is like so important. The fact that as a documentary filmmaker, you do not need permission from anybody else. You do not need permission to make films. You do not need permission or approval for your film to look like anything. You only need permission from yourself to do what it is that you do, and to experiment with it, and to let it be. I think that is like really key to your practice as a documentary filmmaker, like above all, the thing that drives you to make films and to tell stories, that you let that thing be and grow and not like censor yourself or self-critique so much that you sort of like kill it or you try to put it in a box to fit the vision of somebody else. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned this idea of a vision, I think that we're all, as storytellers, we're all going to have different visions. And so you were asking me earlier, as an independent filmmaker, what I think, you know, makes it challenging to do this type of work. And obviously, you know, access is a huge challenge because we don't always have access to the funds that we need or to the resources that we need. But I think that when it comes to bringing your vision as a filmmaker to life, it's really, really important to surround yourself with with family and with people that see your vision and that value your story and your voice,
Yeah.
because that means that they're always going to be down, you know, to travel this road with you, and they're going to want to support you in making this vision come to life. And with everything that's going on around the world right now, I've seen this term come up that's really important. That's, you know, that is, you know, accomplice, the term of finding an accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, you know, it's really important to surround yourself with accomplices, people that understand why it's important to fill the media landscape with images that are missing. You know, I feel that there's a big responsibility for storytellers, and that's why filmmaking is so important, because there's so much missing from what we see every day. And you know, and it's really important to allow for people to, you know, to bring people in and for them to understand this responsibility. Because for me personally, it's become a huge responsibility. I want to do what I can to to you know, to fill the media landscape with images of my people,
Yeah.
of Central American people, of Salvadoran people, and other global communities of color that want to see themselves in the world, want to see their realities represented, want to see their truths being told. and for me, that's a huge part of my practice, and that's a huge part of my drive. And so I look to surround myself with people that understand that responsibility and that want to be a part of that work and want to bring those stories to life, want to bring that vision to life. And I think I shared this article with you that was written by Sonia Childress. Childress, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but maybe it's Sonia Childress or Sonia Childress, but her article about the reckoning, as she calls it in the documentary industry, is brilliant. And there's a concept that she uses in the article, that what she calls narrative justice. And I was just blown away and so excited, because I feel that that's what we're all trying to do. That storytellers, you know, from marginalized communities, I feel that that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to achieve narrative justice, because it's it's an injustice to not be able to see your stories out there. Yeah.
On that note, tell me, like, what have you been working on? What is upcoming before we wrap up our chat today?
Well, let's see. For the moment, I am just trying to to fully devote myself to my filmmaking practice as much as I can. Um, I'm I'm in a moment in my life right now where I can I can dedicate my time to to growing as a filmmaker, and that's what I want. I feel that the past 6 years I've been doing a lot of community driven work, and I've been doing work within uh, art organizations, and you know, that work has been incredibly fulfilling, and I've learned a lot. But I also feel that it's time to step away from that and start using the things that I've learned from these past 6 years, and also, you know, the tools that I've acquired, and the accomplices that I've connected with along the way, to start, you know, bringing some of the visions to life, because it takes a lot of work and time, and I just want to start just really focusing on, you know, my filmmaking practice, and also connecting with other young filmmakers, or filmmakers my age, that find themselves in a similar situation, and that are ready to, you know, to bring their own visions to life, so that we can kind of help each other. I'm a huge collaborator, and I I love working with people, and it's something that I want to keep doing. I think that it's why I became a documentary filmmaker. I and I'm also interested in doing different types of filmmaking. You know, I hope to get into narrative one day. I love experimental film. At the moment, documentary film is what calls to me the most. Um, and I just, you know, I it's what I want to focus on right now. So uh, at this moment, I have different projects going on. Um, they're all at different stages. Well, there's the short film that I shared with you. That's called Tamales Y Tunas, that I'm really excited about. So Tamales Y Tunas is a short film that explores the realities of the South Carolina indigenous Guatemalan community. That was I was so fortunate to be a part of that project. It's directed by my good friend Lucia Archila Escobar. She's a Guatemalan journalist based in South Carolina, and it was my first time being DP on that project, which was super scary and terrifying, but also a wonderful experience. You know, like, I was terrified the entire time. But I felt really lucky to, you know, to be the woman behind the camera. It was a huge Central American production, you know. um, Lucia was the director, and it was edited by Maria Luisa Santos. She's from Costa Rica, and she's awesome. She's young, and we're all emerging filmmakers. You know, we're all just getting started, and it was really exciting to put that together. So that's we were really lucky because we wrapped up production in February, so right before all of this, right before the pandemic started in the United States. So we were really lucky to be able to complete that, and it's gonna start its film festival circuit. So I'll as soon as I can share, because we have an exciting premiere for that film, but I can't share that yet. But I will let you know because we're really excited about that opportunity. So there's that short film that is going to be out in the film festival circuit, and then there's other projects that I have in development. One of them is Vena Aquatica, which I've been working on for 2 years now, and it's really close to my heart because it's about the environmental crisis in El Salvador, and it looks at how it looks at the water crisis in particular, but I wanted to be a really I want it to be a documentary that defies structure, and I want it to be very poetic, and it's about uh, it's about visually putting in parallel how society treats women and how society treats water, how that's inextricably linked, from the Salvadoran perspective. Um, so there's a lot of really huge themes in that film, and it's a big project close to my heart. So I hope that that with time I'm able to gain the funding necessary for it, because that's right now it's the biggest challenge is fundraising for a film like this. I'm currently in the development stage, but it's definitely something that I'm going to keep pursuing, and in a country that has El Salvador suffers from femicides, and femicides means when people are murdered because they identify as women. So that's something that happens a lot in El Salvador. Just right now, during this time of pandemic, between mid-May to mid-June, there have been 28 women that have been murdered alone because of gender-based violence. So that is something that really drives me as a Salvadoran storyteller. And I believe that in a country like El Salvador, where so much of our natural resources are exploited, like water, for example, water is hugely extracted and privatized, so that it can benefit, external forces and foreign countries, and a lot of the Salvadoran people are left to struggle with water scarcity. It's really important to look at the parallels between the way women are treated in a country like El Salvador and the way the environment is treated, because I think that it says a lot about just what is at stake, and who the most vulnerable people are, and what why is it that a country like that is willing to exploit so much of their environment. What is the cost? What is at stake? And it's incredibly interesting and concerning to me that that at the same time, you know, women are the ones that are the first ones to face the environmental trauma that is, you know, lived in a country like that.
Yeah.
And they're dying, you know, clearly in a period of a month, 28 women have been killed because they're women. And so what does that mean? You know, if they're the ones that are being killed, it's obvious that the state does not care about them. So since they're the ones that are the main people to suffer environmental trauma, you know, what does that say? What does that mean? And so that's a big part of what this documentary is about. And I think that this documentary is just the beginning for me. I think that, you know, the themes of environmental exploitation and trauma is something that I'm going to keep working on throughout my the work I do. For example, in next year in January, I'm going to be a part of an artist residency in Arizona for the Sonoran Desert Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization in Ajo, Arizona. And I'm really excited to be a part of that. I found out that I was selected probably like a couple of months ago. The residency was supposed to take place right now in June, but of course, because of the pandemic, it got pushed back. But I'm really looking forward to that because Ajo is this really small town near the U.S.-Mexico border, and right next to the Sonoran Desert. So a lot of environmental exploitation is happening in that area because of the border wall. And I think that for me, I'm really excited to explore that area and what is happening in that part of the United States on my own. And, you know, tell the stories from that area from a perspective of someone like me, you know, someone that doesn't believe in borders and that, you know, completely rejects borders. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm really excited for you also. And I do remember like Stephanie and I we had the privilege of seeing a sample of your work of Den Aquatica back in November in Amsterdam at IDFA when we were, you know, both.
Yeah, if then.
Yeah, the if then pitch for our respective projects. And I love.
Thank you, Chloe and Caitlin.
Yeah, that's how we connected. I'm really looking forward to seeing that film. So like, I'm wishing you like all the best, like in raising funds and, you know, bringing it to fruition so we can see it on film. So we're gonna like wrap up today our chat.
There's so much to talk about though.
We could like continue talking for like 3 hours. There's so many things to say. I'm pretty sure that we're gonna have a chat, you know, again at some point in the future.
I hope so.
Amada, thank you so much for like sitting down and taking this time to talk with me and to share your experience and, you know, bits and pieces of your life as a filmmaker, and also sharing pieces that are more, you know, vulnerable, that sometimes we're hesitant to share, or that I think as filmmakers growing up, we did not necessarily see in other filmmakers. We always saw the finished, I say finished, you know, in quotes, image of the filmmaker, the one who's made it, who's already there. And we're just like striving and not understanding that as you're striving on this journey, this is part of it. Like all the nicks and the dents and all of this is part of the what seems to be the finished filmmaker. In any case, the image that we see. In your experience as a filmmaker, is there anything so far in your journey that like you sort of like a takeaway that you'll be like, okay, um, if there's somebody who's like up and coming, like they're just starting off, like I would tell them, like do this or don't do this, or maybe like this was something that I wish I had known. Like, is there anything like that in your experience so far? Like, I wish I had known this when I was starting off, or if you're like just starting as a filmmaker, definitely do this or definitely don't do this.
Yeah, I think that something that I would tell people that have because I already feel so new to all of this, and I'm ready to be a lifelong student.
Yeah.
I'm ready to keep learning, and and I think that what I would tell someone that is just getting started or that has less experience than I do is that it's important to surround yourself with people uh, that with people who love you and people that you love. I think that it's really important to build your own film family, and it's not about trying to to seek some type of validation
Mhm.
from people that have some kind of power, because at the end of the day, those power structures are just illusions, right? And that's what we're trying to dismantle. And it's more about surrounding yourself and working with people that you trust and um, that will support you along the way.
Yeah.
And you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out together. It's okay if you haven't gone to film school, and if you have, that's cool, that's amazing. But it's okay if you decide to do things differently. And I think that you're you're stronger when you're a part of a team of people that want to share visions with you.
Yeah.
And I hope that doesn't sound too daydreamy or whatever, but I really think that it's important to surround yourself with
I think
people
it's
that
a
believe
fact.
in you.
Yes.
Yeah, surrounding yourself with people that believe in you and that believe in the same values and the same cause, so that you can like have each other's backs and build together uh, towards uh, towards a world where there's more access and openness to different types of people and cultures. I think that that's what matters, and that's become slowly what I've been learning along the way. And yeah, and finding people that want to do this type of work with you is really hard, because at the end, especially documentary filmmaking, it's not about a reputation, it's not about stature, it's not about money.
Glamorous.
it's about it's about sharing stories
Yeah.
and celebrating different lives. I really do think that a big part of why I'm a filmmaker is because I love people, you know, I love what makes them complex or what makes them weird or what makes them stand out. And yeah.
Amada, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm already looking forward to everything that's, you're going to do, your projects. I'm looking forward to seeing your next film. And of course, we're going to stay in touch. And
Please, yes. Hopefully one day we can collaborate together. I want to work with Creative Sun Films.
that would be amazing.
That would be crazy. I would love it.
Yes.
I think that would be great. Yeah. I am sure that that is in the cards. I am sure.
This is going to be a film about women somehow.
Yes.
I don't know.